At dinner, my mom set her fork down and set it flat. I had 1 month to find a new place. They'd sold the house. I wasn't going with them. No warning, no discussion. My dad stared at his plate. My sisters smiled. By morning, their suitcases were gone and the house echoed like I'd never lived there. 6 months later, my phone buzzed with a message from my mom asking why I was still there. I laughed. She had no idea who owned that house. Before I tell you how this happened, tap like and comment you're listening from if family pushed you out. My name is Cheryl. I'm 26 and I work in tech. On paper, that sounds impressive. In real life, it just means long hours staring at a screen, cold coffee on my desk, and a brain that never really shuts off. I've always kept my head down. No flashy clothes, no big announcements. If you passed me in a grocery store, you'd probably never look twice. That's how my family always saw me too. Someone who blended into the background. From the outside, we looked like a normal American family. A decent house, dinner together most nights, holidays that looked fine in photos. But inside that house, there was a quiet hierarchy everyone understood without ever saying out loud. My mom ran everything. The schedule, the rules, the tone of the room. She had this way of smiling without warmth, like affection was something you earned, not something you were owed. My dad rarely challenged her. He wasn't cruel, just absent in the moments it mattered. When things got uncomfortable, he found something fascinating on his plate. Then there were my sisters. The younger one was still in high school, loud, dramatic, used to being indulged. The older one, in her early 20s, carried herself like the world had already promised her more. They both had opinions about my life, about my job, about how quiet I was, about how I never seemed to be going anywhere. At the dinner table, their voices filled the space. Mine barely left my throat. I learned early not to ask for much. Birthdays were small for me, sometimes forgotten until late evening. Vacations were too expensive if I wanted to come along, but somehow affordable when it was just them. I stayed home a lot, watched the house, cleaned up, learned how to be useful without being noticed. By the time I was a teenager, I got a job after school. Not because I wanted extra spending money, but because asking my parents for anything felt like begging. With my first few paychecks, I bought myself a used laptop. It wasn't pretty. It overheated and whined like it was always tired. But it was mine. That laptop changed everything. I started teaching myself to code at night sitting on my bed while the rest of the house slept. Lines of logic made sense in a way people never had. You put the work in, you got results. No favoritism, no guessing games. Still at home, nothing changed. I paid my share, covered my own expenses, stayed quiet. Let them believe whatever they wanted about me. I told myself it was temporary, that as long as I kept my head down, I could survive there a little longer. I just didn't realize they'd already decided I was disposable. That dinner didn't start out any different from the others. The kitchen smelled like roast chicken and pepper. Plates clinked. My mom moved around with that tight, efficient energy she always had when she'd already made a decision and was just waiting to announce it. I sat in my usual spot, shoulders still tense from work, telling myself to eat fast and disappear upstairs. My dad cleared his throat once, then went quiet again. My sisters leaned toward each other, whispering and smiling like they were in on a joke I wasn't supposed to hear. Halfway through the meal, my mom set her fork down. "I need everyone's attention," she said, calm and measured. Then she looked straight at me. "Especially you, Cheryl." Something in my chest tightened. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look angry. That was the worst part. She spoke like she was reading a grocery list. The house had been sold. The paperwork was done. They were moving. Tomorrow. I blinked. Moving. Where? "That's not important," she replied. "What matters is that you'll need to find somewhere else to live. You have a month." The words didn't land all at once. They stacked. Sold, moving. A month. I looked at my dad. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His hands were folded on the table, knuckles pale. When I turned to my sisters, the older one smirked. The younger one pressed her lips together, trying not to laugh. "You're serious?" I asked. My mom nodded. "We're not taking you with us." She said it so cleanly, it almost sounded reasonable. Like this was the natural order of things and I'd simply missed the memo. My dad finally spoke. "You're an adult, Cheryl. You should have planned for this." Plan for my family selling the house without telling me, the younger one snorted. Guess you better start packing, she said. Tech jobs don't pay that well, right? They laughed, not loudly, not cruelly enough to make a scene, just enough to sting. I waited for someone to say this was too far, for my mom to tell them to stop, for my dad to step in. No one did. My food sat untouched, growing cold. I felt that familiar pressure behind my eyes, the one that usually came before tears. I swallowed it down. Crying had never changed anything in that house. So that's it, I asked quietly. That's it, my mom said. We've made our decision. They went back to eating, to talking about neighborhoods and schools and how much lighter the new place would feel, like I'd already been erased from the room. I sat there until my chair felt heavier than my body. Then I stood, murmured something about being tired, and went upstairs. I closed my bedroom door and pressed my forehead against it, listening to their laughter float up the stairs. In that moment, something inside me finally shifted. This wasn't neglect anymore. It wasn't favoritism. It was disposal. And while they thought they'd just pushed me out of their lives, they had no idea they'd just stepped into a situation they couldn't control. They left the next morning. I woke up to the low rumble of a car engine outside my window and the sound of doors slamming shut. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed the whole thing. Then I heard my mom's heels on the hardwood floor downstairs, sharp and final, like punctuation. By the time I walked into the living room, boxes were stacked by the door. The couch was gone. Family photos had been taken off the walls, leaving pale rectangles where memories used to hang. My dad stood by the window keys in his hand, already halfway somewhere else. My mom glanced at me like she was checking one last item off a list. Remember, she said, adjusting her coat, "You've got a month. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder for who my sisters breezed past me, laughing about their new rooms, their new neighborhood, their new start. No one hugged me. No one asked if I was okay. The front door closed, and just like that, the house went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, hollow quiet. I stood there for a long time after their car disappeared down the street. The air felt different without their voices in it. Every sound echoed my footsteps, my breathing, the hum of the refrigerator they hadn't bothered to take. I walked through the house slowly, room by room. Empty shelves, bare walls. My childhood home reduced to a shell, and somehow I was the only thing left inside it. That was when the weight finally hit me. Not panic, not fear. Just a heavy, sinking realization that my family had made a clean break. They hadn't argued. They hadn't hesitated. They'd simply decided I was no longer worth the space I took up. I sat on the floor of the living room, back against the wall, and stared at nothing. This was usually the point where I'd cry, where I'd blame myself, where I'd wonder what I'd done wrong. But instead, something colder settled in, because the truth was, this didn't come out of nowhere. 2 months earlier, I'd been scrolling through listings late one night, half-heartedly thinking about moving out someday. That's when I saw it. My address, my room, photos of the house I was still living in, staged and polished like I didn't exist. They had put the house up for sale without saying a word to me. I remembered staring at my laptop screen, feeling hurt first, then angry, and then clear. Clear in a way I hadn't felt in years. I hadn't confronted them. I hadn't asked questions. I'd made a call instead. While they were packing boxes and planning their future, I was quietly setting something in motion, something legal, something irreversible. Back in the empty living room, I stood up and brushed the dust off my hands. The house felt too big, too silent, but for the first time it also felt honest. They thought they'd abandoned me. What they didn't know was that this was the moment I stopped being the person they could step over without consequences. And the next time we spoke, the balance of power wouldn't belong to them anymore. 6 months passed. Not quietly, not magically, but steadily. The house changed first, not in some dramatic makeover show way, just intentionally. New furniture replaced the empty spaces. The living room no longer echoed. The kitchen smelled like coffee again. At night, the lights stayed on because I wanted them to, not because I was waiting for someone else to come home. I changed too. I stood straighter. I slept better. I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. They never checked in, not once. No, are you okay? No, did you find a place? Nothing. I think in their minds I'd already vanished. Someone else's problem. Someone else's burden. Then one afternoon while I was working from home, my phone vibrated on the desk. Mom. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. When I finally opened the message, it was only 6 words. Why are you still there? No hello, no concern, just confusion. Annoyance even. I laughed. Not out loud. Just a quiet breath through my nose. The kind of laugh that comes when the last piece clicks into place. I didn't reply. An hour later, another message came in. Then a missed call. Then another. I let them sit there unread while I finished my work. When I finally set my laptop aside, I felt calm, grounded. They were about to find out, and I wasn't going to rush it. That Saturday morning, I heard a familiar engine pull into the driveway. I didn't look out the window right away. I already knew who it was. The doorbell rang. I took my time, smoothed my sweater, took one deep breath. Then I opened the door. They stood there, all 4 of them, like they were waiting to be let back into a place that still belonged to them. My mom's smile froze the second she saw behind me. The couch, the rug, the art on the walls. My sister's eyes darted around the room. The younger one's mouth actually fell open. What is all this? My mom asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. My dad followed silent as ever, his gaze fixed on the floor. The older sister ran her fingers along the back of the couch like she was afraid it might disappear. This stuff isn't cheap, she muttered. I closed the door behind them. Sit, I said, gesturing toward the living room. They did. My mom folded her hands in her lap, trying to recover her composure. Cheryl, she began, we need to talk about what's going on here. I leaned back in my chair. You mean why I'm still living in my house? Her head snapped up. You're mine, I repeated evenly. Silence dropped into the room like a weight. That's not funny, my dad said finally. I'm not joking. My mom's smile strained. You don't have that kind of money. I shrugged. You'd be surprised what happens when no one's watching you. The younger one scoffed. You're saying you bought this place? Yes. With what the older one asked. You were barely making rent, I smiled. Just slightly. That's what you thought. My mom stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Explain. Right now. So I did. Not every detail. Not numbers that would make their heads spin, just the truth. I worked in tech. I'd been building things quietly for years. I'd partnered with someone I trusted. We'd done well. Better than well. I saw the listing months before you told me I said. You put the house up for sale while I was still living here. So I made a decision. My mom's face drained of color. You let us sell it to you. I bought it legally. Everything's handled. Payments, bills, ownership, all of it. The room felt smaller by the second. My dad rubbed his temples. Why didn't you tell us I met his eyes? Because you didn't ask. The younger one jumped in. If you had money, you should have helped us. My mom shot her a look, then turned back to me. We've been having some financial stress, she said, her tone shifting, softening. The new place costs more than we expected. Tuition is coming up. We could really use your support. There it was. I nodded slowly. Let me get this straight. You sold the house without telling me. You told me I had a month to leave. You laughed when I asked where I was supposed to go. And now you're asking me for help. We didn't know, she insisted. If we had known, if you had known I was useful, I said you would have treated me differently. That's not fair, my dad said weakly. Isn't it? I stood up. My hands weren't shaking, my voice didn't waver. That surprised me most of all. You didn't forget me by accident. You didn't overlook me. You made choices. Over and over, you decided who mattered in this family, and it wasn't me. My mom's eyes filled with tears. We're still your parents. No, I said. You're people I'm related to. That's not the same thing. The older sister crossed her arms. So that's it. You're just cutting us off. I'm setting boundaries. The younger one started to cry. You're being cruel. I looked at her. No, I'm being consistent. I walked to the door and opened it. You should go. My mom stared at me, stunned. This isn't over. It is for me. They left the same way they had months ago, quietly, without looking back. I locked the door and leaned against it, exhaling for what felt like the first time in years. Justice didn't feel loud or dramatic. It felt clean. And finally, the house was truly mine. They didn't disappear right away. For weeks after that day, my phone lit up with missed calls and messages. My dad left voicemails that started with apologies and ended with excuses. He said he should have protected me more, that he didn't realize things were that bad. I listened to one. I didn't listen to the rest. My older sister sent long texts about misunderstanding and family bonds. She said she missed me, that she wanted us to start fresh. The younger one asked for help more directly. A new phone, money for school, little requests wrapped in guilt. I didn't respond. Then my aunt came by one afternoon. She brought coffee and that careful tone people use when they think they're being kind. She told me my parents were struggling, that they regretted their choices, that holding on to anger would only hurt me in the long run. I told her the truth. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns hot. What I felt was quiet, clear. I'd spent years shrinking myself to fit into a family that had already decided I didn't belong. Walking away wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. She nodded, even if she didn't fully understand. Life settled into something calmer after that. Work stayed busy. The house felt like home in a way it never had before. I hosted friends. I celebrated my birthday for the first time without waiting to be remembered. Some nights, I sat in the living room with the lights low and thought about how close I'd come to believing I was worth less. I wasn't. I never had been. Walking away taught me something simple but powerful. Family isn't about who shares your last name. It's about who stands beside you when you have nothing to offer but yourself. The moment I stopped begging to belong was the moment my life finally became mine. If this story hit close to home, you're not alone. Share where you're listening from and what you would have done in my place. And if you want more real stories about boundaries, betrayal, and finding your power, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.